Hey y'all, it is Cactus Chan here, and I wanted to today do something a little different than I've done in my previous videos on this channel. Um, as some of you may already know, I recently created a document which details a full list of skills for 3 potential new EpicDuel classes. This is not some nebulous suggestion like has been put out there for new classes in the past. This is a fully formed, fleshed out idea, mostly created by me, but I also had some help from Makion, who many of you may know as a great EpicDuel player. So, this video is going to go over all of the details for these skills in depth. A quick note, if any of the Arctic's team is watching this, like any of the developers or testers or anything like that, um, I appreciate that you're watching this. I just wanted to lay this out in detail so you can kind of get an idea for what we're going with, and to kind of get that this is in my opinion, this is a plausible idea. So let's jump over to the document here. So this is, this is just the basic, very, very basic thing. It's just a text document, but I just want to go over it. So it's created by me. I did get some ideas from the skill core suggestions thread, which was very useful, and I will mention which cores were taken from that as I go through this. And of course, special thanks to Makion, especially with the third class in this document. So, first of all, let's start off with a new Mage class, Earth Mage. Now, I gave it, of course, everyone has 550 HP. I gave him 550 energy. Now, you'll notice the support is really high. I do mean this to be really good for support builds, as you'll see later, but I also left a good bit of room for focus builds and dexterity builds, and you might even be able to make a strength build out of this, depending on what you do. So, first off, Field Medic. Obviously, every class is going to have this. I decided to make it the Mercenary and TM version, which is the middle one as far as strength goes. There's really not much to say about that. So now we get into the new skills. So first, we have our first passive skill here. Passively increases all base stats by a percentage. So this is kind of like Gene Augment on Cyber Hunter, except it increases all stats. And you'll notice that the percentages are a little bit lower than for Gene Augment. Obviously, I need to do that to make it not completely overpowered. I think that this is actually pretty reasonable. 10% at max level. If you think about it, a pretty standard Focus 5 build, for example, you're going to have 45 and everything except technology, so 10% of that is going to be 4.5, which is rounded to 5. So you get plus 5 on strength, dexterity, and support, and then, if you have 95 technology, you're gonna get an extra 10 from that. So it's not super, super strong, but it still is pretty reasonable. Doesn't scale with anything. There is a stat requirement, obviously, as there is with most passives, which is technology. Just, to keep it in check. This would also be good for focus builds. Now I want to move on to one of the many caster type attack skills in this class. This is kind of the key one, obviously, as it's a level 1 skill. So this is kind of a unique idea. It has a 25% crit chance, so it's a little bit similar to Plasma Cannon and Bunker Buster, but it does not have a defense or resistance ignore. Instead, it deals energy and physical damage. So it's going to be 2 attacks, 1 deals energy and 1 deals physical. Pretty standard base damage, 130 base cost plus 20 per level. It does improve with support, and it improves pretty fast. This can be nerfed if necessary, but again, this is just part of the idea of making this a good support class. And then, in order to keep, from having extreme support spam, you have a dexterity requirement. And as you'll notice up here, you can have up to level 2 before you have to start investing dexterity points. Okay, tactics. This is actually a skill that was from EpicDuel's alpha phase. Nobody's really quite sure if it was actually implemented or not, but it was at least fully coded, and it technically was in the skill core suggestions thing, but that was probably just because it was in the game or it was fully coded in the game. So this is a support buff. This is the only stat buff that we do not actually have as a skill. But Machion pointed out to me that, you know, straight support buff probably isn't that great. So added 10% damage reduction, kind of like Field Commander has 10% extra crit, and Blood Commander has lifesteal. So pretty typical 4 turns. Base values are there. It's 90 plus 10 per level, so it's going to be 180 at max, which is pretty standard again. I did make it scale fairly quickly, at least compared to a lot of other stat boost skills. So this again is going to be good for 5 focus because, you know, imagine you have like 120 technology and you're going to get like 50 support from level 1, which is pretty good. And that also can be really good in 2v2 if you're matched up with a support-based multi-build, of which there are many in 2v2. Okay, so Impale. This one is, you know, your pretty standard mage melee attack. Probably a pretty similar animation to Assimilate on Tech Mage. So the thing that makes this unique is that it deals extra damage and it has lifesteal. So this is kind of the lifesteal move for this class, and it's the way to gain HP other than Field Medic. So it has a pretty good damage percentage, +3 per level. Energy cost is 110 plus 20, pretty similar to Bludgeon. I think Bludgeon might cost a little bit more, but I can't remember off the top of my head. It does improve with Dexterity, which was an adjustment I made to make Dexterity builds a little more viable. Or, I'm sorry, this is a stat requirement. I'm doing a little brave, or it doesn't improve with anything. I'm thinking of something else that's on another class, so I'll get to that. So, 3-turn cooldown, just because this will be a strong skill. Like, imagine you have it at like level 5, it's going to be 190 energy, 32% extra damage, and 25% lifesteal. It's pretty good. And it has a dexterity requirement just because. Then we have our stun skill. This is a caster skill, so obviously it's unblockable and deals physical damage. And of course 25% stun chance. So, you know, base values. I might lower this energy cost a little bit, but it is only +15 per level, pretty similar to Overload and Stun Grenade and Plasma Grenade. So we'll see how that goes. Improves with technology. Again, good for... I thought I meant to make this improve support. Anyway, I'll go over that again. I might make some necessary changes, but this is pretty much a final draft. Anyway, improves with technology. Not too fast because, you know, it is a stun skill, but I thought this was pretty reasonable. It does require a staff. And this also requires a staff. I forgot to mention that. So these two both require staffs. I think these are the only two skills in this class that require a class-specific weapon. So now we move on to something that that I came up with myself, and I've been wanting to see something like this for a while. So this is kind of the main shield for this class. Increases defense and resistance. Here's the interesting part. This applies for all levels of the skill. So, in other words, you will be safe from all stuns and all crits for 3 turns. I've been wanting to see kind of an RNG blocker like that for a while, and you'll see at least one other skill like that has an RNG manipulator. So, I think it'd be kind of interesting to see where we could go with that. So, the base values have a pretty similar scaling to Defense Matrix or Energy Shield, except, you know, they're a lot less. Same with the scaling. Now, I made the base energy cost 120 because, you know, even at level 1, this is going to have full effect, so I wanted to have it a little bit stronger than normal. And then it's +15 per level instead of +20 for other shields. I might change that to +20 depending on how it goes. Okay, Battle Fervor. This is something that I've thought has been missing for a long time. So we have Bloodlust, which converts outgoing damage to HP, and we have Reroute, which converts incoming damage to energy. It wouldn't really make much sense to convert incoming damage to HP, because, you'd be taking less damage all the time. That wouldn't really make much sense. But I do think it makes sense to have a skill that adds outgoing damage to the user's energy. Now, the key distinction here is that it's outgoing non-skill damage. So that means if you're using skills, you aren't going to get an energy cost discount, basically. However, this does apply to cores. So if you're likely using Skullcracker, Improbability Gate, or anything like that, you will get energy from it. So depending on how much damage you do, you could completely negate the cost of that core, or even have net positive energy. And of course, this would be really great for focus builds. It does have a support requirement though, and obviously that could be really advantageous for support builds because their auxiliary does a lot of damage, and with elemental Wraiths you can do a lot more damage. So now we have Earth Rupture. This is, pretty standard multi-skill. It's basically the energy equivalent of Fire Rain because it ignores 10% resistance. But, it's just a pretty typical caster one, typical energy cost. It improves with Dexterity. Pretty similar scaling to Plasma Rain for Tech Mage. And, of course, 1 turn warp and 3 turn cooldown. Not too much to say about that. This one is a little interesting. So, this is the Energy Drain skill for this class. It has a kind of similar effect to the Phantasm Droid special, except it's reusable. And you only drain opponent's energy with this. You do not regain any yourself. So it's gonna cost energy, but it increases by 5% per round until you get to 40% more than the base percentage. So for example, if you're using level 1, the max amount you could drain would be 60% of your primary damage. Which, I think is fair. That's, if you're a strength build, it's going to be a lot, but this one doesn't lend itself too well to strength builds. You might be able to squeeze something out, though. But it does get better with levels, so this will become 30% eventually, so it can go up to 70% at full charge. Notice, though, that because it has a 4-turn cooldown, you can use this, when it's only gained 20 or 25%, so you might not use it at its full effectiveness. So that kind of adds a tactical aspect to it as well. Okay, so moving on to the ultimate skill for this class. This is a energy damage skill, ignoring 30% resistance. I thought it would be interesting to have a little bit of a different effect here. So you convert bonus damage's percentage of remaining energy. And what I mean by that is like how much energy you have before you use the skill. So like if you have like 500 energy, then at base you're going to deal 50 extra damage. And that base increases every level. Now you might notice that, it's a little bit lower base damage than a lot of ultimate skills, and it increases slower than most ultimate skills because most other ultimates are 30 per level. And that's because of the damage addition. This might lead to some interesting builds where you have a lot of energy, and so you're dealing a lot of extra damage. I'm not sure if I should cap how much extra damage you have, but then again, I don't think you really need to, because the most energy you can really have is 2,500, and no one is going to go anywhere near that high. So this is another dexterity improving skill, and you might notice that there have been 3 of these now. There's this one, there's the multi, and there's the shield. So that could lead to some interesting dexterity builds at higher levels. Technology requirement because, it's dexterity improving. Finally, we have an old skill. So this is from before passives came back in early 2019. I'm sure many of you remember Fire Scythe on TM. So I pretty much copied and pasted it from the old values. It ignores, certain percentages of resistance. It costs the same as Impale does, except it has a slightly different effect. So this one, and so Fire Scythe and Impale could both be good for strength builds. So, don't count it out. It does have a support requirement, pretty severe support requirement, 37. So you could have a strength support build, but no, you never know. That's the skills for Earth Mage. The suggested skill trees I came up with aren't like super set in stone. These are definitely the most malleable parts of this whole document. You can change them if you want to. It doesn't matter a whole lot. But, this is just kind of what I came up with on the fly as what I thought would be good. So, let's move on to the next class, which is Cyber Mercenary. So, because it's a cyber class, I gave it a little bit higher energy. This is going to be mainly, I wanted it to be a strength and technology based class. That's why, these are higher, these are lower. So here we have Field Medic for Tactical Mercenary and Cyber Hunter, which is the weakest of the three types of heals. And I think that because this will be a pretty tanky class, and also for another reason, which you'll see in a little bit. One of the skills has something to do with that. So this skill was taken from the suggestions page. Thanks to Machion for that. So here you strike for max damage against minimum defenses. What that means is that the damage values and the defense and resistance values that your opponent has will be essentially negated. So this will always do the same amount of damage every time, unless it's blocked or it crits. So it's kind of a very reliable attack. As a result, the energy that you drain will also be very reliable depending on the level. So this is the energy drain move for this class. So it's not super strong, but I think for strength builds it could be pretty effective. Notice that it does not deal any extra damage though. It's just, well, technically it does, but it's, you're not adding any damage to it. It does require support to keep, the strength from piling up too hard. Here we have Schadenfreude. I really like this word. If you're not familiar, Schadenfreude, basically it's a German word. It means taking pleasure from somebody else's pain. German has a lot of cool words like that. Anyway, so this is the lifesteal portion of the class. And it's pretty good lifesteal. Even at base it's 20%, and it's only 80 energy cost, but plus 15 per level. You also gain up to 10% more if you're at level 40. Keep in mind that all the base values are at level 20, which is pretty standard. So you get up to 30% base at level 40, and this would turn to 50% obviously, and it does improve with strength also. So like if you have like 80 strength, this is going to go up to, up to 90% lifesteal, which is crazy. But obviously you have to waste a turn doing it, and it doesn't give you any other advantages. So now we have Biohack. This is the only straight defense or resistance debuff that I have throughout all of these three classes. And this is not, it doesn't reduce dexterity or technology, instead it's just a straight up debuff to resistance, kind of the opposite of Energy Shield. I didn't want to make it too overpowered. This might need a little bit of tweaking depending on what builds people come up with. But it improves with technology, because again, I want this to be a tech-based class. But it does require dexterity, and as you can see, this class does not have much dexterity, so if you want to be investing points into this, you need dexterity. Here we have one of the more interesting passives in this document. So this was also an idea that came from the suggestions page. So this would allow the user's HP and energy to be regenerated beyond max by a certain percentage. Now, you could do this by using Schadenfreude and attacking a whole lot. You can do it by healing. You can do it by energy gain, which I'll get into in a little bit. So I had to add kind of a caveat here, which is if your HP is above your max value, you get a debuff, just because you don't want to gain all that HP beyond your maximum and have a particular advantage. I think 50%. I think 50 defense and resistance is pretty good. Notice that this is 50 flat value, not a percentage. Now the thing is, there is no disadvantage for having your energy overflow. So this would be actually really good for tanky builds and for more defensive builds, even for 5 focus. And obviously you can do a lot with more energy. And this will also be potentially good as a boss class, but we'll see. So you can have anywhere from 10 to 40% overflow. So like if you have 1,000 HP to start, you can go up to 1,400. If you have 700 energy to start, you can go up to 840. Well, no, it'd be 980 at max level. But it does have a support requirement, which again this class does not have much of. That's just kind of to keep it in check. Now we have our first straight up melee skill. So this is just, your typical mercenary high damage melee skills. So it ignores a percent of defenses, kind of similar to Fire Scythe, except it is blockable. And the energy does not scale as fast. Now you can improve this with dexterity, but it does require a club, and it requires dexterity. I may want to change that. Yeah, I probably do want to change that. I'll come up with something different. Probably support. But it's just a pretty standard melee skill. Now we have another old skill here, battery backup. Again, a lot of you may probably recognize this. This is probably one of the most beloved active skills from when passives were gone. Everyone liked this skill. It was really good for bosses, and it was pretty good in battle too. Now, if you look on the wiki, you might notice that these values are a bit higher than the ones listed on the wiki. That's because Makion pointed out to me that this is this class's only energy regeneration option. So I want it to be a bit stronger. So that's why that is. And if you take into account level scaling, I think it goes up to like 370 or something like that, which is pretty good. But obviously the Fortune cooldown just keeps it from being too OP. Now we have the shield for this class. So this is kind of a mix between Reflex Boost and Technician. Improves dexterity and technology. So similar to how Ceramic Shield works, the base values are lower than for either of those two skills, and the scaling is slower. But again, it gives you both. So in terms of absolute magnitude of how many stat points you're going to get, it will be higher. But you do have to, you have to put support into it, and obviously it won't be as big of a buff to any one given skill or your robot than Reflex Boost or Technician would be. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So now, this right here is one of my favorite skills in the whole document. I have been wanting for a long time to see a melee multi-skill, and this is it. This is it right here. So this is the multi-skill for this class. And you'll notice that it doesn't really operate like a normal multi does. It doesn't deal a fixed percentage of damage to each target. Instead, I had the percentage scale. So at level 1, it's only going to deal 75%, but then it goes up to 80, then 85, then 90, then 95, etc. Once you get to level 6, you're dealing 100% weapon damage to each target. If you're a strength build, that's pretty darn good. And it goes up to 120% at max level. That is the same strength as Crippling Strike for Tactical Mercenary. And any of you who use Tactical Mercenary will know that Crippling Strike is a strong skill. So imagine doing that kind of damage to both targets at once in 2v2. Or in Juggernaut, potentially. Now, obviously, I had to balance it for 1v1 also, so it deals more damage than 100% at level 1. It goes up all the way up to 140 damage, but it would cost 320 energy if you wanted to do that. So I thought that was pretty fair. It's going to be probably similar strength to Berserker, which, it's a mercenary class. Why not have something similar to Berserker? And like that, as a 1-turn warm-up and 3-turn cooldown. But that's also just because it's a multi, and you have to kind of do that as a multi. Okay, here, this is not technically an old skill, but it's basically just Deadly Aim, except for auxiliaries. So, I thought that this would fit on this class. You might be thinking, oh, well, Cactus Chan, you said that Earth Mage is a support-based class. Why wouldn't you put it on Earth Mage? Because I think that would be too overpowered. I mean, you already have a bunch of support improving skills, including a really strong caster skill. I thought that this would work better here because, if you have Biohack and you have something that we'll mention later on, which also improves with technology, and, this is probably going to be a very energy damage based class. So if you want something different, you could have a physical auxiliary, which is going to be improved by Deadly Precision. But it does require strength. And this, this class could be a strength-based class, but it's not really it's not really one that lends itself too well to support, but you could do something, because remember, this does improve the support, and if you have a lot of support, that's going to be pretty valuable, especially in 2v2. Okay, let's move on to the, I lost my train of thought. Let's move on to the ultimate skill for this class. So this is probably the most interesting out of the 3 ultimate skills. So this one does energy damage, 30% crit chance. Notice it doesn't ignore defense and resistance necessarily, but the other interesting effect is that this is the part that I really like. It decreases the target's damage output by 25% per 2 turns. So basically what you're doing is you're not only dealing a bunch of damage to them, and you have a pretty high chance to crit, but you're also making it so that they can't really counterattack you very effectively. So, like, if someone's about to kill you and you use this, it's like, they're like, oh crap, I can't deal as much damage to them anymore, and I might not be able to kill them. Which, is kind of the idea. So, pretty standard base values, base energy. I did make it improve with dexterity. I'm not sure if that will work out very well, but I didn't think technology was the right move considering the other skills in this class. Another option might be support, but I don't know how I feel about a support-based ultimate skill. So we'll just kind of have to see how that plays out. But it does have the support requirements. So if I did change this scaling to support, this would become a dexterity requirement. And finally, we have Biotech Grenade, which is kind of you could call it a caster move because it's unblockable damage. But this is actually the stun skill for this class, which seems to be placed a little oddly, but this is just kind of how it worked out. And also it has a 15% crit chance. Oh, and it is based on primary weapon type, pretty similarly to Adaptive Offense on Cyber Hunter. So, pretty standard energy cost for a stun skill. It does improve with technology, so, imagine using this paired with Biohack, paired with, one of your really strong melee skills with an energy primary, or, even you could go with an energy auxiliary with Deadly Precision and stack up on support. But because of all that, it favors strength, it favors technology, it favors support, therefore it has a dexterity requirement. And again, you can look through this skill tree if you want. It's not set in stone. You can do what you want with this. Now we move on to maybe the most interesting one. So this is the one that Machion helped me out with the most because it was really rough in its beginning stages, and I really didn't know what to do with some of its skills. I even, reused a couple of current skills, and we were like, yeah, that probably isn't a good idea. So Machion definitely helped me a lot with this one. So this would be a strength and dexterity based class, which seems kind of weird, but you'll see what I'm getting into in a little minute. So here you have Field Medic. So this is the Bounty Hunter and Blood Mage one, which is the strongest Field Medic, which I think is pretty fitting because this class doesn't have great HP regeneration. This might be my favorite skill out of all of them. So this is the other RNG manipulating one on this document. So you're going to strike, and you're going to decrease all healing effects, but the really fun thing is you guarantee a crit on the next attack. And that could be a double-edged sword because, you could use a really strong attack, but your opponent could force you to do something else, like drain their energy. Well, not drain it, but like use an energy draining move, or use a weak core, or force you to strike, and then you're not going to deal much damage, and that crits. This is very much a tactical skill. You really have to be careful with this one, but obviously, if you guarantee a crit on the next attack, that could have some very powerful repercussions. But you only have 2 turns to do it. If you wait longer than 2 turns, you're not going to be able to have that guaranteed crit anymore. So the healing decrease is kind of ancillary, but it might help if you're dealing massive damage. So that would be kind of interesting. It does require a wrist blade, but there is not a stat requirement. So Mana Shield is this is a skill that Machion came up with. I originally had Defense Matrix here because I didn't really know what else to do, but he suggested Mana Shield. Apparently this pops up in a lot of other MMORPG games, so this is going to increase technology, not by too much, but by a decent amount. But the key part here is that all incoming damage will be diverted to the target's energy. So what that means is that, say someone is attacking a person who has Mana Shield on them, and say the attack is going to deal 200 base damage. So what this is going to do is this is going to divert 60 of that damage and deal it to the Mana Shield user's energy. So you're going to lose 60 energy, but you're also going to take 30% less damage, which, you know, again, double-edged sword, but you could potentially reduce a lot of damage this way. And depending on what you're doing, you could be gaining a lot of energy anyway, which I'll get into later in the class. It does improve with dexterity, you know, just for purposes of not having it to be too overpowered. It doesn't have a stat requirement, though. Here we have another old skill. Sadly, this was removed from Cyber Hunter a while ago, and we really want it back, but I don't think it'll ever happen. EMP Grenade is, you know, it was a staple of Bounty Hunter for a while, and then it was a staple of Cyber Hunter, but it's been removed from the game. But I think this is a good fit for this class. It's the energy draining move. It's pretty good. You know, anyone who used EMP Grenade back in the day knows how strong it can be. So I lifted all of this from the wiki, so this is just the standard values. Now we move on to my favorite passive in this entire document. So this would probably be the one that's hardest to program, like actually put into the game, because it really is a different effect from anything that we have in EpicDuel, but it is a really interesting effect. So I want to go over this in a little bit of detail. So here, your block effectiveness will be decreased the higher you level up the skill. So if you're not already familiar, blocks decrease the damage that you take from melee attack by 85%. So what this does is that lowers that percentage. So at level 1, you're only going to block 75% of damage. But in return, you deal all of the remaining damage. So at level 1, the remaining 25% of that damage to the opponent automatically as an unblockable strike. So say someone's going to deal 400 damage to you with a melee attack. That's a lot of damage. But you're going to block it. So if you block that, then that's only going, it's going to be reduced. So he's only going to deal, 100 damage to you. And in return, you get to deal 100 damage out to him, which is 25% of 400. So this is, again, kind of a twofold skill. So even if you have max damage, that 200 damage attack is going to do, or that 400 damage attack is going to deal 200 damage, but in return, you will also deal 200 damage to the opponent, and then it'll be your turn. So they really have to be careful about what they do, and that could really screw them over. And, as you can see, it has a dexterity requirement, which kind of synergizes very well because it's going to increase your block chance. So this is the one that this is the passive that I really like the most, and I'd really like to see implemented. And this, by the way, was in the skill core suggestions page. So here we have Invigoration. This is a buff for the class. It's very simple and just increases all of the user's damage by a percentage. So very simple, 5% to 25%. Pretty cheap energy cost, but again, you do have to waste a turn using it. Doesn't have a weapon or stat requirement, so that's something. Here's another interesting one. Machion helped me out with this one. So you strike, you increase the target's skills and energy core cost, and you decrease their damage output by a percentage. So this could be a very interesting thing because it really limits what they can do. So obviously, if you're reducing their damage output by 23%, they're not going to be able to do much damage to you. And it's going to cost them more to do it if they're not using basic attacks. I think maybe we might want to buff the energy cost here, but I'm not sure. It does scale with level, so that's nice, but it does require technology. So now we have the stun skill. Now this was a little bit of an excuse for me to bring back the old uppercut animation that bounty hunters used to have for their normal strikes, which I'm so sad that left. I want to see that back. So this would have that animation. So you deal extra damage here, and you have a 25% stun chance. Now, some of you might recognize that this is pretty similar to what Brutal Strike was when it was first added to Blood Mage. That was kind of the idea, but, you know, again, this is blockable. I thought it fit pretty well with the class because it doesn't really have a whole lot of extra damage attacks. But imagine the kind of damage you could do with this thing with a stun chance and Mark of Weakness, guaranteed crit. Think about that for a second. This is very much a control and entrapment class. Your opponents have to be pretty careful with what they do. Now, do note that it has a support requirement. This class doesn't lend itself very well to support, so I thought that this was a good way to cut down the effectiveness of this skill, because it is a pretty strong skill. Okay, and again, pretty basic multi. This is the physical version of multi-shot for Bounty Hunter. It's not super exciting, improves the dexterity. You know, you have to have a multi on there. There are just certain things that you have to include on every class. Here's the other passive for this class. So here you regenerate a fixed amount of energy after every attack that you do. So if you're using a shield, or you're healing, or you're stunned, and you're not attacking, you're not going to get that energy back. So this is kind of interesting because you have to be attacking in order to gain energy. But as you can imagine, this could be pretty powerful because look at that max level. If you're dealing an attack, you get 115 energy back on the next attack. So, you know, comparing this to, like, say, battery backup, if you attack 3 out of the 4 turns the battery backup is you know, cooling down, you're getting 345 energy out of that. That's pretty comparable. I would say it's worth it, honestly. But again, it is over a longer period of time. You have to be attacking for this to be in effect. And it does have a technology requirement. And now we have the ultimate skill for this class. It's basically just, you know, it's an RPG, it's a rocket launcher, and it deals physical damage, ignoring 30% defense. The thing that makes it unique is it lowers the target's rage gain by 40% for 2 turns. So it's almost the same as the physical equivalent of Surgical Strike, except it doesn't decrease the target's rage that they have. Instead, they gain less. So it's kind of like Pacify, which, you know, isn't a great core by itself, but when you add it to something like this, I think it could be very effective. And it improves with dexterity. I don't really have a lot of dexterity improving ultimate attacks. Maybe it's because there aren't any in the game and I want to make up for it, but whatever. And it has a strength requirement. You know, strength requirement synergizes pretty well with the overall class because you have a lot of melee attacks that deal a lot of damage. And, you know, in my opinion, if you're firing an RPG, you need to be a pretty strong dude. Or dudette, whatever. Okay, last one. Fusion Grenade. This is the lifesteal move. So you deal unblockable energy damage, improves the technology of 25% lifesteal, which, if you're a focus build, you're going to gain a lot of HP from this, which I think is pretty good. But it has a support requirement, so, you know, you can't be running all technology and no support. And finally, the skill tree. So that is just about all. So again, sorry for kind of the long, rambling, no gameplay video. That was, you know, kind of boring, and I didn't really do anything very exciting. But I think that this could really be good classes for EpicDuel in the future, because we really need some variety in this game, and I think that introducing new classes could really bring some life back to this game. And again, This is not just, some random thing. Oh, we need new classes. We need new classes. This is a concrete proposal. I really want to see this get in the game. I really hope that this is seen by a lot of people. If you like this, share it with other people. Make sure it gets around. We want to get the developers and the testers and all of the Arctic's higher ups to see this and really think about it and whether it could be implemented. That's about all. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace out.